Let's look at these TPims. These are the replacements for the control orders. I don't know what you make of those, because there's quite a lot of people, mostly Muslims, have been put under these control orders, stuck into a house, and they're not allowed to leave the house, they're not allowed to use a mobile phone, etc., etc. Anyway, earlier this week, there's a chap called Mohammed Ahmed Mohamed who's being discussed rather a lot. He apparently went into a mosque and changed into a burqa and then disappeared. He's been under one of these TPims for a very, very long time. And earlier this week on 5 Live, Victoria Derbyshire, who does a morning programme on BBC 5 Live, spoke to Mohammed Ahmed Mohamed's lawyer, Gareth Peirce.
The committee that is investigating this, it seems, one hopes that they have further hearings in which they're given accurate information, not utterly misleading and false information. And there is much important public debate continuing on the back of this, and if enormous changes in the law are yet further recommended, it would have to be on proper information. What was said was quite wrong. Firstly, the young man in question, the breaches were being late by minutes at a police station, and for the most part in a police station in Ipswich, a town which he had no connection, where he was parachuted in on a control order, having been forcibly removed after being tortured in Somaliland. It's the most extraordinary case with the most extraordinary record of state complicity in illegality. And for it to be being presented as a young man who by choice was in this country when he lived in Somalia with his wife and child, who was prevented from returning from Somaliland where he'd been tortured and falsely arrested, to his wife and child, but instead forcibly removed to this country, on entry detained under Schedule 7, which the courts found was unlawful on his re-entry, placed under a controlled order, subjected to exile in a town he knew nobody, in a country he didn't want to be, and then to condemn him with criminal prosecution for being late to report to police stations when, as a torture victim, he should have been being treated and supported, is a most extraordinary circumstance. And yet one hears no trace of any of that in what's being reported.
So Mr. Mohammed was living in Somaliland until you say he was forcibly removed here to the UK 2 years ago.
Yes.
Why would he be forcibly removed, and by whom?
He was detained for a period of over a month in Somaliland, subjected to a mock execution, tortured, starved, in circumstances where there is clear evidence that the British authorities had pre-knowledge and pre-planning of his seizure in Somaliland, were present and contributed to his interrogation there and torture, and were party to his removal to England. This is all documented and was disclosed in the course of the control order proceedings. This is not imaginary. This is on the record.
Before I ask you about the allegations of torture in Somaliland, why was he being detained?
He doesn't know. He never knew.
Does he know why he was brought back to the UK?
No.
He's a British citizen, though.
He's a British citizen of Somali origin, his family from Somalia, and that's where he'd been living for many years.
And what is your evidence that he was tortured with British knowledge and complicity?
The evidence came from Mr. Mohammed himself in the proceedings which were heard by the High Court in relation to the control order, and then thereafter the TPims, as they're called.
And what is that evidence?
His evidence was that he was seized in Somaliland, which he was visiting, and that present at the time of his seizure, when he was then hooded and shackled and subjected to thereafter to a mock execution, that he heard British voices and that the questions put to him under interrogation in Somaliland emanated from Britain, were focused on Britain and people in Britain.
What is your client accused of?
I think you should ask the authorities and not us, because he's subjected to an executive order which depends upon secret evidence, not evidence that he's made party to, and is dependent on, so far as he's concerned, a generalised allegation which he always strenuously denied, that he was party to any activity that could be called terrorist in Somalia. He strenuously, vociferously denied it and demanded to know the evidence, but he was subject to proceedings in which it's all designed to be heard in secret.
So when you hear or read comments that suggest that your client has, quote, close links with Al-Shabaab, what do you say?
He denied it. He denied that throughout.
Theresa May, as you know, told MPs that Mr Mohammed does not pose a direct threat to the public in the UK. Is that right? And does he pose...
I'm sure he posed no threat to the public in the UK.
Does he pose a direct threat to anybody anywhere, as far as you know?
No. Nobody who hears this, who reads it, recognises the Mr Mohammed that they had dealings with. Nobody recognises it. It's an extravagantly exaggerated, inaccurate, misleading, and at the end of the day, dangerous picture being painted.
The alleged breaches of the TPim and control orders are these. Accusations that he tried to access the internet without approval, had a digital storage device, met a person without the approval of the Home Office. He's alleged to have failed to report to an Ipswich police station, possessing a mobile phone he'd not been given permission to have, failed to report to Acton police station on 6 occasions in December 2012 alone. You say there's nothing sinister in any of that?
Do they really sound like sinister allegations, or the kind of thing that any young man might be subject to, but particularly a young man who's been wrenched from his life, his lawful life, and deposited in places in the country where he has no one and nothing to do?
Lord Justice Jones described the case against your client as overwhelming. This was the accusations of supplying Al-Shabaab with money and manpower. And Lord Justice Jones went on to say he may be more deeply involved in the terrorism-related activity of the network.
The question has been asked and not answered, never answered. Where did this information come from? And Mr Mohammed has always said that he believes he was seized in Somaliland on the basis of malicious misinformation by probably one individual who appeared to come into a great deal of money at the time or shortly after Mr Mohammed was seized. If you don't know the evidence, and you don't know your accuser, and you don't know where it's come from, which is the vice of secret hearings on which these executive orders are based, how can you ever demolish what may be entirely imaginary? How can you do it? How is a human being to deal with it?
Mr Mohammed is suing the British government over the allegations of torture you described. What stage is that case at?
That case has already hit the rocks of the new enterprise the government is embarked upon, which is erecting secret courts to hear evidence. So you could sue the government for involvement in torture. You could win the case and never know why. You could lose the case and never know why. This is not a comfortable process that's consistent with the rule of law and the right to an open public hearing, and is much opposed by many of the best and most serious legal minds in this country.
Why do you think he will have disappeared last week after disguising himself in a burqa?
I can't speculate on that. But what one does know is the despair of individuals who have been subjected to sterile, isolating regimes such as these, who in the end can bear it no longer. There's one young man, Gary Boulevant, who I know has spoken publicly in the last few days, subjected to the same regime some years ago, absconded, eventually came back, stood trial, was acquitted by the jury when he said, I breached the order because I could not bear the life, and his control order was, in the end, discharged by the High Court as being unjustified.
Was your client's state of mind similar to what you've just described?
Indeed, the courts have been made completely aware of how despairing and distraught he was, and the reasons for it.
Well, a harrowing story there from Mohammed Ahmed Mohammed's lawyer, Gareth Peirce. Cyrus, you were sort of groaning through that, and I suppose it's because, I mean, for many things, you've heard this before. We've heard a massive news story about this terrible guy that's absconded, he's on the run, he's very dangerous, and then we hear another complete side to it, where it turns out that it looks like our security services have helped kidnap him over in Somalia on false information with a bribed witness, and taken him back to put him in a place where the regime on him is so draconian, even though it doesn't look like there's any proof that he's done anything whatsoever, that he's decided that he's going to have to try and get away. I mean, personally, I don't really blame him.
Who wouldn't? You're walking along in your own country, minding your own business, and guaranteed it will be a team of at least 8 people. What? Bang, head, covered, snatched, taken somewhere. You don't know what's going on. You're being interrogated, like you said, by another set of people that are not English. There's certain regimes that are very good at torture, been doing it a long time. Then you're flown over here and given some draconian measures, and you're now the new poster boy for terrorism. Do not approach him. He's a very scary person. And the thing is, I also thought about this, Tony. If they didn't show it on the news so much, you wouldn't be scared. You wouldn't be hyped up. And it's a war against Islam, and it's a much bigger than what I think the general public.
Well, I think people are slowly wising up to this, aren't they?
Yes, I do.
I mean, we heard there about this whole idea of mock execution. I know that you've had some experience with that. Tell us about.
Yeah, well, when I first joined my regiment here, and I tell you, it was very funny because when I was in Taunton, as some junior soldiers joined up with my regiment before we passed out, and they came back off exercise, and they went with a corporal that was he was known to be a very physically hard. He could fight, and he came back with these young recruits from the regiment I was going to join, and they made a big official complaint because they said they're animals. Them guys are animals, and he said, "My God, I've been in the army 12 years." And he looked at me and he goes, "I feel sorry for you, Cyrus." He said, "You and Pete Cat have got to go to that regiment." He said, "Whatever you do, make sure you stay away from A Company." Tony, as God made little animals, I met Pete Cat. August the 5th, Dover Station. We made our way up to the camp. I said, "Pete, I hope we don't get A Company. Anything A Company." Went to the guard room. I went, "Cyrus, which one's Cyrus? Which one's Cat?" Looked at me, got the usual look. "Oh, this is a black one, love. Well, you're A Company, 1 platoon." I went, oh my God. Joined there, and there was this black man at the regiment who was like a demigod. And he was in A Company, and he was meant to be, and I thought, oh God, Anyway, he was only there for, when I joined up, he was there on a Monday and disappeared. By Wednesday night, the welcoming party, well, funny enough, Tuesday night, Pete Cat had gone missing. Couldn't see him. And then I was in bed Tuesday night. So Pete went missing Monday night. I was in bed Tuesday night, and all of a sudden I got woken up, and then I got hit over the head with a fire extinguisher, and I got, and I mean hit, not tapped. I'm talking hit.
What, enough?
I'm talking hit.
Enough to knock you out.
I'm talking hit. Yeah, no, your mum and dad ain't coming to get you. I got hit. The blood spurted out. I got hit. Hessian sack over my head, tied up and bundled up quickly, professionally and properly, and thrown in a cupboard. Then I was tied up in the cupboard, and every now and again people would run in and kick 10 tons of... Anyway, Pete Cat come flying in the room, and he's gone, they're going to hurt you, Pat. They're going to hurt you. They're going to hurt you. They're going to hurt you. Anyway, I went out there to a kangaroo court. I was whipped with the rifle slings. I got 86 lashes, and I still got the marks on me to this day. And, you know, locked in put in an army cupboard, and they filled it full of water. That gives you a sense of drowning because you've only got a little hole, you know. And as the night got on, it gets a little bit more brutal. And it's like, well, if you survive it, you're part of the platoon, Tony. Obviously, sometimes these things get very out of hand. So imagine now that you catch what you're told is the enemy, and you have to remember. In the military, back in the day, we was taught that civilians are the lowest common denominators. They're a little less worthy than rats. You're actually doing the world a favour if you got rid of them. Remember that mindset. And see, this is the thing. You'll get a lot of soldiers on television who are TV friendly. It's the ones that ain't on television, don't want to talk to you, don't like the world, clear off, or I'll double tap you, mate. And there's a lot of men like that, and you know, and if they do, they might mutilate the body as well. It's war. It's a messy night, and that's why you have you come back with it with issues, because things that go on there don't normally go on in civilized society. And this is what I would say, maybe the politicians should have to go in the army for 3 years at least. They shouldn't all come from public schools.
What, as officers?
No, well, and I say this, Tony, and maybe if they did, all around the world just might slow down on the fighting and killing, because it seems to be working class people dying for the rich. It's a hell of a thing to be giving your life for something that you probably don't believe in.
Well, I certainly agree with you there.